Good evening and welcome to the West Yorkshire Football Show. And this is our Bradford City special. I'm Chris Bell, and joining me are Jason McKeown and Gareth Walker from the Width of the Post. How are we, gents? Are you both well?
Yeah, good. How are you doing, Chris?
Yeah, not too bad. Now, it's been, I guess, a funny time for the pair of you since Mark Hughes' departure in particular. Two positive results under Kevin McDonald as caretaker. Jason, I'll come to you first. Kind of what's changed?
Yeah, it's been a bit of that bounce back, hasn't there? It does happen at a lot of football clubs when a manager's sacked. There's suddenly that big improvement overnight. The caretaker comes in, has a good impact, and we don't often see it at Bradford City. Normally, the misery continues when it comes to us, but this time around, it has been a real change. And I think that the big thing with Kevin McDonald coming in, it did feel a little bit left field when he was appointed as caretaker manager. It wasn't what you were expecting. I think we all would have thought Mark Truman would take over as caretaker manager, but instead he's come in and done that. And I think he's right in the dressing room. He's at the heart of what the issues are and the mood amongst the players. And I think that's probably been quite an inspired move by the club, really, to get him in charge when he knows what some of the problems are and how players are feeling. And the big thing is he's simplified the approach over the last couple of games, especially on Saturday, and made us a little bit more direct, a bit more just get the ball forwards, less of some of the complications that were in our game before that. And I think when confidence is low, when things aren't going that well on the pitch and players are struggling with that, especially playing at Valley Parade, where it's been a little bit toxic this season, I think it's fair to say, that was just the right approach. I think the opposition we had in Swindon really suited us as well, because they were a team that liked to pass it. They were attack-minded. They came to have a go. It was complete contrast to the Walsall game, for example, the week before that, when Mark Hughes' last home game in charge, where they park the bus, the onus is on us to try and break them down, and we have a lot of the ball and don't do a lot with it. I think Swindon made it an open game, and that suited us really well. And it was just an all-round really, really good performance. You can make arguments that we probably could have lost the game potentially. Charlie Austin missed an absolute sitter 2 minutes in. They have some other good chances as well. But I think that look was there, and we made our own look really during the course of the game, and it was just a really good win. And then similar at Grimsby on Tuesday night, giving some of the other players who've not had much of game opportunity a go was a really good move, I think, as well. And we've ended up with a squad who were clearly looking a lot happy about things at this moment in time, back to basics and getting some wins behind us, which is just helps everyone, I think.
Yeah, I don't think anybody, I don't even think Colin Doyle expected Colin Doyle to play last night. Gaz, I mean, how much of a surprise was it that it wasn't given to Mark Truman and that it was handed to the man, as Jason mentioned, that was in the dressing room in the heart of it all?
Yeah, it was a real shock when I saw the announcement. I know that everyone expected the change that Hughes to go sort of early doors on Wednesday after the game at Trommy, or even possibly in the Tuesday night after the game. But it sort of took all day till late on the Wednesday before the announcement was made, and it makes you wonder if they were having discussions with people then as to who was going to take over temporarily. Yeah, totally expected it to be Mark Truman. Kind of glad that it wasn't, in a way, because when he took over the first time with Connor Sellers, he did really well. But the second time he took over, I can't remember which manager it was who'd left then, but he took over again another time as a temporary manager, and he didn't do particularly well. So I was quite glad that it was somebody else, but it was a real shock that it was McDonald. Just glad that it was, because he's turned everything positive in 2 games. I know it's early days and you don't want to get too carried away, but the positive influence that he's had both on the team and the knock-on effect that that's had on the supporters has just been really good and made everyone feel a lot better sort of a week later.
Are we thinking they've basically just gone, well, you are probably the most senior man in the dressing room, all bar Colin Doyle. Let's give you the reins, sort of thing, in this case?
Yeah, probably. I think he's done at least some, if not all, of his coaching badges. I think he was when he was out of the game because of his issue with his kidney. I believe that he was doing some coaching at Fulham at the time, so he has got a little bit of experience that possibly other players in that dressing room don't have coaching wise. But to give it to somebody like that who's obviously played at the top level, he's played for Scotland, played in the Premier League, he's got a bit of coaching experience. In hindsight, looking back, maybe we shouldn't have been too surprised, but at the time, it definitely was.
Now, obviously, I spoke to Simon Parker a little bit earlier on, and he, to be fair, echoed what you were saying there in terms of that surprise element. But he also said that, Kevin McDonald's alluded or hinted, without necessarily saying it, he doesn't really want the job, so to speak. He is, though, unsurprisingly, 2 games in and 2 wins, the clear bookies' favourites. I think he's evens at 1-1 currently. I mean, is it are we in one of these situations where if he's in charge for another 2, 3, 4 games and does all right, that actually he could get handed the role, or are we still expecting an outside appointment?
Do you want to take that, Jace, or shall I take it?
Hey, whoever wants it takes it.
Sure, we go. I personally, the big bugbear for me of the last few years at Bradford City is the short-termism we have at this football club, and we're rife with it and always changing stuff. And I have huge concerns about us appointing Kevin McDonald as permanent manager, especially on the back of a couple of wins. It's very often, as we talked about before in football, that when a manager is under pressure and loses their job, there's been a real regression in form, and often that kind of goes back to, there's a bit of a reaction, some positive results, and it's very easy to give the caretaker all the credit for that, and to an extent that's right, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's fixing the solutions in the long term. And I think that the big problem we keep having as a football club is that every time something starts to go wrong and we have a bit of a sticky patch, we sack the manager, we change it over. And giving Kevin McDonald the job because he's had a good bit of form, when we don't know what he'd be like in defeat or after a bad run, just sets us up once again to change managers. So I really would I've got nothing against him. I think he's done brilliant, and I'm sure he'd have a great career. But I would not be happy with appointing him as caretaker manager just on the back of a few wins. That to me is a big concern at this moment in time, that we might go down that route. So I'd like to think the good thing is it buys us some time at this moment in time. It means that they can hopefully make a much more considered decision. I'm sure we'll come on to talk about some of the candidates that are there, and it's not the most inspiring list of people who might take over at this moment in time. So you've really got to get this decision right.
I'm taking offence at that. Sir Daniel Cowley is on this list, so
yes.
We'll come back.
I just agree with what Jason said. I think the last point that he made about it buying us some time, that's the key point here. There's a lot of people getting carried away on social media saying, "Oh, give him the job," but it is 2 games, and one of those was in the Pizza Trophy. So it's a case of like, let's see how he gets on with maybe a run of 4 or 5 games. See how that goes, and then you can maybe make a decision. But even then, whether it's gone good or bad and you want him or you don't want him, even then, after that period of time, it's probably going to be down to him as well. And if, the sounds he's making at the moment, that he doesn't want the job full time, then we're going to have to look elsewhere. But the key thing is, as Jason said, it's bought us some time, and we've got to use that time and make sure we get this decision right. Because too many times in the past when we've been flopping and changing, we've got the decision wrong, and we need to get it right this time. It's vitally important that Ryan in particular gets one right.
Yeah, as you say, it's one of those that it would be a massive risk to appoint, especially in this case, a rookie manager, McDonald. To be honest, regardless of how well he does in his caretaker spell, you make a fair point about the chopping and changing. I've mentioned this to Simon Parker earlier on. When you go back over even the last, 5, 6 years, some of the managers and the stints they've had have not been long when you factor in, I mean, crikey, David Hopkin, anyone? And that ill-fated spell then. But there's appointments here in the past that have looked like they will be quite good on paper. Again, I think I'm thinking Hopkin had just got a promotion. You look at Derek Adams, of course, who had, I think, 2 promotions on his CV with Plymouth and Morecambe. What is it about the Bradford City job where it doesn't matter whether you are a novice or in this case, the last case, the experience of someone of Mark Hughes, that it just seems to swallow managers up?
It is that short-term cycle that we're stuck on, unfortunately, and we've obviously regressed massively on the pitch over the last 5 or 6 seasons. That's added the pressure on, because anyone who's coming into the job, it's all about getting promoted as quickly as possible. There isn't really that kind of bedding in period. But what we're really lacking is just with Bradford City, with any football club, you're going to have really tough moments. You're going to have stuff where things go wrong, and you're going to have that crisis points. And you need a manager who can come through those periods and also be backed through those periods by the people above, by supporters, to come through the other side of it. And every time we have a sticky moment with whoever manager's been, it's been about moving them on, getting rid of them. And sometimes that's completely justified. Sometimes it's been a bit harsh and unfair. I think Hughes is a little bit harsh, losing his job, if I'm honest. But we need to get to that point where we can have a manager who's got a bit of credit in the bank, where when we do have that sticky moment, we'll get through with them. And Phil Parkinson is always a great example of that, because he had a phenomenally successful 5 years at the football club, loads of successes, but he also had some really difficult moments as well, and sticky patches. Famously, 1 win in 21 at one point, and we stuck with him. Supporters largely stuck with him. The owners stuck with him at that time, and we got rewarded out the other side of that. And we're going to have to find a manager who, great when things are going well, but also when things aren't going well, we have to all kind of stick together much more than we are doing at this moment in time. And And the frustration is, I don't know how we get to that point, but until we do, we're always going to keep chopping and changing, because there's no football club, with the exception of Man City, is winning all the time, and you've got to be able to manage the downturns, and we can't do that.
Is that the risk, Gaz, that, frankly, because of the size of the fan base, that no matter who comes in, we could be sat here in 18 months, 2 years' time, where there's almost the same situation, that it's going to be a situation, where if things don't go right, the fan base splits, some get on the back, some try and back them. You end up with this chopping and changing all over again.
Yeah, I think a key way to stop that is just to, it sounds simple, but to make sure you get the right person in the first place. Every single manager that we've had.
That's easy, guys.
Yeah, but I just feel that, like, maybe this time we've got to look at a profile that we want as a manager. I think we've got to look at things like style of play. What style of play do we want him to play? Because, as Jason said before, he mentioned on Width of a Post, we flop and change between going from a manager who wants to play direct football to one who wants to play passing football, then one who wants to play direct, then one who wants to play passing. I'd like us to sit back, use this time that Kevin sort of got us a little bit of time here, and build a profile of what we want as managers. So what style of play do we think is the best way to get out of League Two? That's the first thing. And we're going to stick to it. So if this manager doesn't work out, the next manager is going to use that style of play because that's the way we think is the best way to get out of League Two. Other things like, what age of a manager do we want? What transfer policy is this manager going to have? What sort of players is he going to want to bring in? Are those players going to align with Stephen Gent, the transfer guy at the club? What's the youth policy on that manager? Does he like to play young players? Does he like to bring youth players through? Do we want to bring youth players through as a club? We've got to look at all these things and build the profile of the guy that we want, and then go out and find that guy and then stick with him. Because if we've built that profile and we've bought, fans will then hopefully should buy into that and see why we've done it, and then get more time from there moving forward. The manager might get more time if things start to go a bit wrong. It was a little bit different with Parky because, as Jason said, he did get time, but he'd earned that time because he'd had the success at the club before he sort of got that sticky spell. So when he first came in, was it like 2012, he kept us up, which was the first aim for him that season. Second season, he took us up. And then he started to maybe had a couple of sticky spells in League One after that, but he had that credit in the bank. The problem comes when you're having your sticky spells before you've had any success. But I would hope that if we've built that profile as a club of a manager that we want, then people might buy into it and they might get a bit more time.
So my follow-up question from that then for you, Jason, is, are there the people at the club, at board level, director level, etc., that you trust to build that profile? And more to the point, because when I was talking to Simon earlier, he kind of thought that this period of time where Kevin's doing quite well will give the board and Ryan Sparks the opportunity to consider, frankly, all sorts of different managers. Is there the trust there that actually that is the route they're going to go down? Or is it going to be a case of the board looking at what's there now and, what's on the table manager-wise and pick what they think is the best one for now, rather than, as Gaz suggests, actually having this profile and this long-term plan?
Yeah, it's to be found, to be discovered, I think, but I've got my concerns at this moment in time. I really have. It's been great what Kevin McDonald's done, and I completely agree about what Gaz's saying about more time to really look at this. But there's also another way of looking at it, is that we've sat Mark Hughes and we don't have a plan of what we're doing next, and that's kind of there really. And the results have helped us massively, but that doesn't change the fact that we're suddenly going, right, we'll just take our time, we'll have a think about it, and there's no rush. And we could see us talking ourselves into giving Kevin McDonald the job, and that was never going to be the plan all along, surely. So it just worries me a little bit. I think Gaz is absolutely spot on with everything you just said before about this is a chance now to really think about that and really define what we're going to be as a football club and do that. And I hope that we're using that opportunity to do that. And if that's the case and we come out of this with a really good appointment and we progress forwards, then Ryan Sparks, Stephen Rupp, everyone who's involved with that decision deserves all the credit in the world for that. They're under pressure this time because I think if they get this appointment wrong, there's going to be some really serious questions asked. There already have been questions asked about this one already, but it's going to get even worse because they absolutely need a hit now at this moment in time. And my concern at the moment with some of the narrative and the noises we're hearing at the moment is that, Mark Hughes equals bad. Everything he was doing was wrong, and we have to change our style again. It's this flip-flopping that we keep doing. And I think there's a lot of good in what Mark Hughes was trying to do at this football club. I think there was a lot of progress that we made from where we were 18 months before when he took over. And I don't think we should chuck all that away. And I think we should be looking at a manager who's going to come in and look at these group of players and be able to get the best out of them and be able to work with them, rather than someone who comes in, wants to change everything at this point in time, which is very difficult to do mid-season. And before long is talking about January and needing to make new signings. The other problem with the football club with this changeover of managers all the time is a churn of players. All the time we're changing them because different managers wants different types of players. And again, we have to get that more settled. We've got a good squad, in my opinion, some really good players at this football club, some real strength in there. And we should be looking for a manager that will come in and work with them and hit the ground running. And that hopefully this time we'll get that decision right and that we can use it with that time. But it does concern me that we don't really know what we're doing at this moment in time, or it doesn't look it from the outside.
What do you reckon, Gaz?
Yeah, I agree with Jason. I think the problem is that like he says, it looks like we've gone into this decision without a plan, and we really need a plan. We need this plan to build this profile, decide where we want to go as a club. History sort of tells us that we're not very good at appointing managers. Why aren't we good at appointing managers? What do we need to do to get better at appointing managers? Is Ryan Sparks? I know he's got a rugby background and he's very good on the off-field stuff and the finances and building the marketing potential of the club and bringing money in. But has he got the football knowledge to get the right person in? And if he hasn't, he needs to make sure that he's speaking to the right people to get the advice to bring that right person in. You look at people like, clubs that have directors of football. I'm not saying we need a director of football, but that would be someone that could help him in such a situation. Or you look at clubs like Peterborough, where Darren McAntony's got Barry Fry on the board, advising him all the time on the footballing aspects of things. Maybe Ryan just needs somebody like that, even if it's not in an official role, but somebody that he can just sort of speak to, get a bit of advice from, someone who knows the market when it comes to managers. You look at people, I'm not saying that we're going to go out and get the next Kieran McKenna, but somebody has seen him somewhere and advised the Ipswich board that that's the person we should be going for. Yeah. Who would have dreamt that up long term, that he'd go to Ipswich? Maybe we need somebody like that. Maybe, I don't know, but we need to get this right, as Jason said, and I think we need to speak to people, whoever that may be in the footballing world, to make sure that we do our best to get this decision right.
Another thing that I kind of want to touch on again before we start talking candidates and such is obviously the budgets and what Bradford can offer to a new manager, but also factoring in that I can't imagine parting company with Mark Hughes comes cheap. I mean, it's gonna be a blow, isn't it? Really, financially, to part with a manager of Mark Hughes' stature, Gaz.
Yeah, I think Jason, we spoke about this on the way on from Tranmere, didn't we? If you look at Derek Adams, we're probably still paying Derek Adams now, and now we've got to pay Mark Hughes, and then we've got to pay whoever the new manager is. So, yeah, the financial aspect will play a big part. And is that going to affect the budget going forward on the player side of things? You'd hope not, but you'd imagine that it is. So, yeah, it plays a big part, and it's a worry. Stefan obviously wants the club to be run as a self-sustainable business, so he's not going to put money in to sort these things out. Whatever money we make, we've got to spend. And if that's going to come out of the transfer pot, it's a worry, especially since, like I said, we could still be paying Derek Adams as well. So, yeah, it's a concern.
What's your take, Jason?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that potentially what it may limit us is some of the managers we can have a look and go for, because you can make a good argument to say Richie Wellings, for example, at Leyton Orient, who is a northerner, who, has done an amazing job at Leyton Orient, but long term may be tempted to come back up north. But he's signed a contract, and we couldn't probably afford to buy him out of that contract. So if we were looking at, as Gaza talked about, that profile, what do we need to take someone on from here on in? Someone like Richie Wellington, his style of football would be ideal, but you're having to buy him out of a contract. So that's something, if you can't do that, and you can't afford to do that because you're still paying off Mark Hughes, Derek Adams, etc., that potentially limits us in where we can go. So it's a concern, definitely, at this moment in time, because there is that feeling, when you lose a manager at this time of the season, there's not a massive amount of candidates out there compared to maybe in January and stuff like that.
Let's get on to then the candidates list. And I mean, the bookmakers, of course, currently Kevin McDonald, off the back of those two wins, is the favourite on evens. Then comes Liam Richardson, 5-2, Danny Cowley, 4-1. The new one today that I talked to Simon about and he wrote about was Lee Bell. And I'll be honest, Simon doesn't make a great deal of it. He thinks it's somebody's agent going for either a new contract at Crewe or just putting his name out there. Who else is on that list? You've got Pete Wild at Barrow, Carl Robinson, who is experienced for the level, out of work currently, Nathan Jones, Neil Warnock, Mike Williamson, who's doing like Gates said, And then the left field mischievous option, I think, is Benito Carboni. That is in a parallel universe, I would love to see it. I can also imagine that would be an absolute sodding car crash.
Yeah, they're looking at going that. They hope if they did that, they'd sort of be hoping he'd have the impact that the cameo had at Swindon, wouldn't they? But I think that's come about from. I think he put something on Instagram, didn't he? He put a picture of himself in the City, playing for City on Instagram, and said something about happy memories or something like that. And everyone's jumped on it and said, "I wonder if he's applied."
Well, apparently he put. I think it was before Hughes. Simon was saying that he'd done some interview in Italy and said that he had applied for the job at the time. And yet, as far as those at City were concerned, he never actually applied for it. So it's just one of those little PR stunts, disasters, whichever way you want to look at it. But the other names that are on there, I mean, firstly, who catches the eye for the right reasons and who catches the eye for the wrong reasons, I suppose. So we'll start with you, Jason, and who does catch the eye for positive reasons?
Yeah, like I say, it's not the most inspiring list, but I think you're looking at probably Danny Cowley.
There is one name that stands out above all the others.
Well, I'm going to say Danny Cowley probably is the one you look at it and think that he probably ticks most of the boxes because he's someone who's been able to progress the football club. You look at the work he did at Lincoln was really impressive. Huddersfield, he kept Huddersfield up in difficult circumstances and was a little bit unfortunate to lose his job in that situation there. Didn't pull up any trees at Portsmouth, and there's probably comparisons to make with Portsmouth's situation in League One and our situation, so that's a concern. But he's done wonders in the past. Probably a question mark about his playing style. Obviously at Lincoln he was incredibly direct, and did a fantastic job with that. And I've got no problem with playing direct to an extent, but like I say, we don't want to change playing style at this moment in time. And I don't think that'd be a wise thing to do. So that's a concern. So, but he looks like he, probably the most sensible appointment out there because he's someone who you could, will come in, knows the league well, knows lower leagues well, and would be able to, take City forward, I think, without necessarily ripping everything up. So he's probably looking the most sensible candidate on there. Bit worried about people like Carl Robinson being on the list because, again, you can look at it, he ticks a lot of boxes, but it's just something about his personality and the way he goes about doing things that I would not particularly enjoy at Bradford City, I've got to be honest. But yeah, I mean, there's no one there going, I'm really, really worried about that, but there isn't anyone either that I'm, mega excited about. And to an extent, that's, the culture manager at Bradford City has been a problem. And Mark Hughes is a big draw. And again, I'm going to make it clear, I think it was a good appointment. And we can criticise Ryan Sparks for, necessarily not getting appointments right. But I don't think this should go down as a bad appointment. But even so, if you're bringing in just someone who may not get people too excited, but actually is the right person for the job, that's what's important in the long run. So I don't mind if I'm a little bit underwhelmed at first by who gets the job. I just want to make sure they do a really good job, and that's on Ryan at the moment.
Yes.
Yeah, keep looking down the betting list, and nobody stands out. There's nobody who I go, that's the person I want. A few weeks ago, since the end of last season, really, when large parts of the supporter base started to turn against Hughes after Carlisle, I was looking at it and thinking, if he does go at some point this season, it's a long shot, but I'd love us to try for Darren Moore. Obviously, he's now gone to Huddersfield, so he's a no-go. He'd have been a long shot anyway, would he have dropped down to League Two? But at the moment, when I keep looking at the names out there, that's where I'm struggling to think I really want him. I really want that guy to come in and manage us. That's why I was talking before about building this profile and getting advice off the right people, because if there is no standout candidate there, then that's probably what you should be doing. And there might be somebody, I'm not saying, like I said, I mentioned Kieran McKenna before, we're not going to get a Kieran McKenna, but there could be somebody in a under-21 role somewhere who's just the perfect man for the job, who we're not aware of, but somebody that Ryan speaks to and gets advice from could be able to point him in that direction. You look at players who've gone into management and succeeded in League Two over recent years. You look at like Matt Taylor at Exeter, hadn't long retired. You look at Michael Duff, who'd done well at Cheltenham, hadn't long retired. Yeah. People like that, and you just wonder if that's maybe the route we should be going down, and there could be someone somewhere who we're not aware of who, that's who we should go for. I agree with Jason about Carl Robinson. I just think he's got a very high opinion of himself, that he doesn't always match up with his achievements on the football field. I know he did well at MK Dons, but that's going back a long way. He didn't really do much at Charlton, didn't really do much at Oxford. There's a few people out there who I'd say, no, I don't want. People are mentioning David Artell. I don't particularly want him because he seemed to have one good season at Crewe, and the rest of the time he didn't really do a lot. So yeah, there are a few that I don't want, but there's no standout candidate that I do want, which is a bit of a problem. And I'm glad it's not my job to find that person. But Ryan's got to find the people that can advise him and push him in the right direction to get that person.
I'll be honest, I thought there might have been a little bit more enthusiasm generally. I thought there might have been more out there that did kind of capture both of these imaginations, really. But I'm proved wrong, it seems.
It's a hard one, isn't it? And you look at people like Liam Richardson, and you think, well, he's got great experience. He's been, here, there, and everywhere with Paul Cook, his assistant Accrington as well, and he's managed Wigan and done really well. But then you start to read up about his style of football, and it's not pretty, really. And you think, well, again, and like I say, I'm not here to saying we should just play beautiful attacking, passing football all the time. I get that we had limitations with what Hughes was trying to do, but I really do not want to see us just change everything at this moment in time, because that's what the mistake we always make. So that's where you're concerned with some of the managers when you look at it and you drill into the style of football and what they do and what they're about. This doesn't seem to quite fit with what's there at this moment in time. And in that sense, I think Cowley is the closest fit to that, because we did our own podcast. We talked a bit about some quotes from Cowley a while ago. He talked about, he comes into a football club and he looks at what's there and he tries to build what's on that first before he imprints his own personality and style in it. And I'd like to see that more. Someone like Carl Robinson, we've had that kind of egotistical manager, Derek Adams. I know it's a different style of football, but that kind of I know everything, I'm an expert, look at me kind of thing. And really just don't think that's right fit for this football club at the moment in time. We need someone who, like I say, will look at that group of players and go, brilliant, I can really get the best out of them. And yeah, of course you want to add to it in January, but you don't want to be going, I need 7 new faces in January. This person here is nowhere near going to be my plans. Get rid of him when he's on a 3-year contract or whatever.
I think Jason makes some good points there. I think he makes some good points. The personality one's a key one. That's another one that we should be looking at when we're looking at the profile of person that we want. Like you mentioned, Derek Adams, he was never the right fit for this football club. Some of us had reservations about it at the time. You read about some of the stuff he's done and said in the past. I just felt that as soon as he got a few bad results, it was going to turn toxic very quickly. And I hate to say I told you so, but that's what happened. And you just worry that someone like Carl Robinson would be the same. The other point that I'd like to make is that out of the out-of-work managers, as Jason and yourself have said, Danny Cowley and Liam Richardson are probably the two that you'd look at as being the two that are most likely, or the two that might be the most desirable. When you look at style of play, and I think I mentioned this on the last podcast, people often get obsessed with his style of play. He plays good football. And people say that, and I think when people say that, they often mean different things. Because to me, I'm not bothered about seeing someone playing tippy-tappy, let's keep the ball, let's play beautiful passes here, there and everywhere on the ground, if it's not creating chances on goal. What I want to see when I go to the football is I want to see us put effort in, be on the front foot, play at a high tempo and create chances on goal. And I don't care whether that is by passing it around 100 times like Pep does, or whether it's by going long and getting people in and around the big man. If we're playing at tempo and creating chances on goal, that's going to make the crowd happy. And that's going to mean that the atmosphere gets better. It's going to mean that players, the team, the fans get behind the players and the manager. And we're going to be in a lot happier situation. It just bugs me when people say he plays good football. Because, like I say, what do they mean by that?
What is good football? And I'm absolutely with you. I grew up when Lincoln, for example, in my early teenage years, were managed by Keith Alexander. And the late great Keith Alexander, in my opinion, and it was probably the most dog ugly direct football you can imagine. But it was what got results, and I will take winning football over pretty football any day of the week. And I think actually, fundamentally, apart from maybe Manchester City fans, I think anybody would take winning football over pretty football. It's going to be interesting. To be fair. Couple of comments. Sky says attack-minded manager and someone who knows that we're a sleeping giant, and she also says that they'd rather win 3-2 than 1-0, and that's fundamentally it, isn't it? It's sort of entertainment at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think the interesting with League Two this year is it's pretty mad when you look at some of the results that are going on there. There's teams are absolutely banging in goals left, right, centre, but conceding loads of goals as well. Look at Notts County the other week losing 5-4 to Colchester, which is just ridiculous. But that's the kind of league we're in. Yeah,
Wrexham, they had a couple of absolutely mental Didn't they have 6-6 earlier in the season?
Yeah. And, Swindon on Saturday, great example of that as well. And you kind of look at that and you're thinking, I want a piece of that. I want to be winning 4-3. I want to be having these crazy games. I mean, yeah, it's annoying when your defence isn't up to it and stuff like that, but you just want to join this party that's going on in League Two at the moment. And you can see that success is coming by being bold, being attack-minded, as Gav says, playing front foot. Those things are there. And that's what's been probably really done against Hughes to an extent, really, is that it was very dull and grey this season at Bradford City. It just wasn't. You see all the fun going elsewhere, and then you're seeing drab 0-0s at Valley Parade or pouring 1-0 draws and just stuff that's not great. And we've been missing out on that. And you just want to see us. That seems to be the way it's going in League Two this year. That's why teams are having success. We could do that too.
Yeah, Paul's comment there. Last Saturday's Swindon game was a refreshing joy to watch. The old game played as it should be. Like, again, you both touched on it being just a better atmosphere for one, but created by a more attack-minded, getting the ball forward and trying to create chances mentality.
Yeah, and I think that's where I come back to with building this profile of a manager. Like in the past, like you look at teams who've gone up from that division. Obviously, Steve Evans, very direct football. But then you look at other managers who sort of play sort of tippy-tappy football. I think that like Exeter always played good football. Well, they got good football under Matt Taylor, didn't they? So like that's why I want us to think what is the best way for us to play and for us to get out of this division and then go down that route. Saturday was night and day. It really was. And that was just because we got on the front foot. We pressed high up the pitch. We played in Swindon's half when we could. And we created chances and went for it. And it was just so refreshing after what we'd watched under Hughes for so long. So anybody that gets us like that is gonna have a little bit of goodwill at the start, and then hopefully they can build on that.
One of the things that we've talked about, I think, to be fair, on the podcast previously, and definitely in our kind of West Yorkshire Football Show group chat, Gaz, about the Cowleys, and for me, the thing they did for Lincoln when they first came in particular, was galvanising the fan base. We went from, a crowds of give or take 2,000 in the National League to under them a real sense of kind of all being in it together and a genuine project and a real togetherness and wanting to improve. And by the end of that season, admittedly, as league champions, I think we were pushing 8,000-9,000 regularly, attendance-wise. So it was a massive increase. Now, galvanisation is one thing that whoever comes in at Bradford is going to need to do with that fan base.
Yeah. How did he do that, Chris? How did he galvanise everybody?
Bloody miracles, to be honest. More by what he said. So it was an unusual situation in terms of there was no post on Twitter. So, Danny Cowley's new manager of Lincoln. He was unveiled at a fans forum for one at the stadium that was well attended. And I think, to be fair, if you went back on YouTube, I would imagine it will still be on there because it was broadcast online as well. And it was. I'm going to be careful because I imagine I could upset Steve Downs quite easily with this because obviously he didn't quite go to plan at Huddersfield, but he's a very good talker. He's a very good communicator, and you can just kind of feel yourself drawn into what he's saying in a positive way, especially with Lincoln, just by the ideas, the way he wants to connect with the community as well as just focusing on what's on the pitch. And it really worked. Everyone bought into it. He recruited players that at the time, because he came in the summer, that he knew. There was I think 2 or 3 that came in that he'd had the previous season at Braintree. And at that stage as well, he'd always said that he didn't want to take jobs mid-season. Now, obviously, that has changed with the Portsmouth and the Huddersfield job. So it will be, I can't speak highly enough of him. If I'd have had a son, he was going to be called Daniel. That's how high he was kind of in my estimations. The style, I said to you, there's players for me that in that Bradford squad that he could work with. For a basis, 2 centre halves, a big man, and players that can play around him. To me, it's kind of looking at that squad. You seem to have that. Stubbs and Platt up front, Cook, and even someone like Verdane and Oliver, who has kind of been cast out completely, could certainly be useful under someone like Cowler.
He'd love it, wouldn't he? Definitely. Yeah, he'd be hoping for a long ball manager with Dane Oliver, without a doubt. Definitely. What you're saying there, it sounds fantastic, and it reminds me a lot of Phil Parkinson, because I think that was the way he was as well with the football club, and that sort of statesman-like approach where he galvanised people, brought people together, made you feel inclusive. And we can romanticise the past to an extent, but I think there was a real unity at Bradford City over those 5 years when Phil Parkinson was in charge, and we are longing for that. And he comes back to the points, like I say, it's the ups and downs of a football club. It's being able to trust and have faith in the person who's in charge when you're having a bad moment, when things aren't going well, knowing they'll come through the other side of it. And we've lacked that sort of a person for so long now, and I think we'll only ever be successful long term if we could find someone like that. We could get promoted with whoever the next manager is, but you could still see it coming crashing wrong in 12 months' time at the bottom of League One. We need someone who really can go through those cycles, because it's a very emotional football club, Bradford City. We're at total extremes. Kevin McDonald's the greatest thing ever. He's the new Pep Guardiola at some moment in time, but next week he'll be the new, the most useless guy ever, and it's managing those extremes at the football club.
I think it's Sky. The new manager will have to galvanise 16,000 fans. Some managers couldn't hack it and tried to blag their way after match like Eric Adams. Steve's been in touch. He's not feeling too well. Hope you get well soon, mate. Top show. Apparently, I'm doing a great job as Cowley's agent.
Absolutely.
I probably am, to be fair, but it's just the way it is. To be fair, the one thing I will say is for someone like Cowley is that I think he would be more careful, like in terms of leaving a club, because obviously with Lincoln, he'd had 3 good years. We'd had two league titles in National League playoffs the second season, League Two title the season after. We'd also won it doesn't count for much to a lot of fans, but the Checker Trade Trophy was the first time we'd won something at Wembley, absolutely. And then had that historic cup run as well to the quarterfinals against Arsenal. With the money that we've raised in that cup run, we built training facilities because we were just training on effectively common ground in the city beforehand. But yeah, I think with something like that, you mentioned about kind of obviously if it didn't go to plan and there were bottom of League One after a promotion season, it's how will that fan base react? I mean, again, to any manager that comes in.
Yeah, that is a worry, because as Jason said, we're so bipolar. You could take us up as champions. Someone could take us up as champions and then be getting told the football's SHIT 6 months later. That's what could happen, literally, if we were the bottom of League Two. It's another one to add to that profile, isn't it? Someone who can galvanise. We're just like need to create this robot, don't we? We really do.
Yeah. Let's be honest. Like, I don't. As much as I will sit here and play Football Manager the game until the cows come home, I don't think you could pay me enough to actually want to do it, because my skin isn't thick enough. It must be such a hard life as a football manager. You're either at the highest highs or just getting absolute pelters week in, week out. And to be fair, that's not just a Bradford City thing. That applies to all clubs.
Yeah, it does. And you saw with Mark Hughes, the way that he didn't handle it at times when that pressure was there and getting questions in the media. I always remember after the Carlisle playoff defeat when on Radio Leeds, Jamie Rayner was interviewing him and asking about the substitutions he made that day. And he just looked so offended and like, how dare you ask me these questions? And clearly was upset by that. And, he's a guy who's managed right at the top, played at the top, incredible career, coming down to League Two. That pressure was just as intense as it would have been anywhere else. And he found that hard at times as well. And it's a really tough gig. And, we have been spoiled with Phil Parkinson. You've been spoiled by Danny Cowley of kind of having someone who kind of transcends that and is can handle those moments and come through it. It's like gold dust, isn't it, really? And that's what you're looking for, that kind of elusive manager who just can come in, really get the identity of a football club, really embrace it, embrace those pressures, get players in who can handle it, really understand and connect with what it is to be successful. It's finding that person, and it's so difficult.
So, I mean, where are we? We're on 11th of October. It's been a week since Hughes departed. How long, as fans, would you want this kind of process to take, and how long do you expect it to take if there's a different answer? So, I mean, I'll come to you first with that one, Gaz.
It's difficult to say because, as we touched on before, it's hard not to think that we haven't really got a plan. That's how it looks at the moment. So it's hard to say how long it's going to take. And I think Simon put in the TNA today that they might not start interviewing until next week. So are they just doing a case of let's see how it goes with Kevin McDonald? But then if it goes well, he doesn't want the job full time. If it goes badly, then do you end up rushing into something having wanted to give McDonald time? Personally, if it depends how Kevin McDonald does, doesn't it? I know it's like kind of a contradiction on what I've just said, but if he's doing really well, then are you going to try and convince him to take the job full time? If he doesn't do particularly well, we need to be working on a plan now for when that moment comes when he does leave, however that may be. But I don't know how long it's going to take. Obviously, ideally, you want it sorted as soon as possible. But whether that's realistic or not, I really don't know. I think what we've spoken about on pods before, and I think Jason Booker mentioned to me once on a podcast, when Leeds dropped down to League One and everyone thought they're too big for League One, it's this kind of similar situation to what we're like in League Two. But Leeds went out and got Simon Grayson as manager from the Championship. We don't have the money to do that, but in an ideal world, that's what we do. We go and look at League One, say, right, who's the best manager there that we can get? Let's go and get them. But because we're not going to do that and we don't have the finances to do that, it's really difficult to say what we are going to do. To be perfectly honest.
Those lines, though, this period of time, and if it does take a while, and if as long as Kevin McDonald is steadying the ship, does having potentially McDonald buying the club this time, one of the things Simon suggested to me earlier on was that perhaps it does give Bradford a little bit more scope to go and talk to other clubs or approach other clubs, perhaps for managers that are in work. I mean, I appreciate the finances on this, and how big a sticking point do you think the finances could be in that when you factor in there's a couple of managers that are on that bookies list, Pete Wild, for example, at Barrow, that could be an option. It's one of those Barrow. I think the job at Barrow that he's done, to be fair, has been nothing short of excellent. Would he want to leave? And again, I know that club size is completely different here, but for someone like Pete Wild that is building, he's putting the building blocks in place of Barrow for a promotion charge, is he necessarily going to want to drop that? Are Bradford going to be able to afford it?
I think someone like Pete Wild, there's only so far you're ever going to take a club like Barrow, and his stock is very high at this moment in time. But equally, that opportunity could pass quite quickly. They're only 12th in the league at the moment, and if they have a mid-table finish, for example, 12 months' time, he's not getting linked with jobs potentially. So I think he will probably be someone who would be quite keen on this opportunity. I'm sure he get compensated better as well. Barrow's quite a difficult place geographically to manage. I know they train in Manchester during the week, but it's difficult to attract players and all that sort of thing. So I think he'd be interested in something like that. So I think that it is something they should be looking at, kind of thing. Because if you are looking at the out of work managers and thinking not that inspiring, and Danny Cowley potentially could have other opportunities as well. It's not just Bradford City who might be interested in him. Then maybe it is about going looking at other clubs and having those kind of conversations and seeing what you can do. And if you can get the absolute brilliant manager who comes in and gets pretty promoted, etc., it's got to be worth that extra bit of investment, even if it means we can't necessarily sign as many players in January or whatever that might be. So for me, I'd certainly be ringing the Leighton Orient chairman and just saying,
absolutely.
Yeah, Rich, can I have a chat with Richie? He's available to talk to, and just testing the waters and things like that, because someone like that just would be a great fit for them. And it goes back to the point you're making about Leeds. Who's the best manager of the Championship? Getting someone like Richie Williams would be a hell of a statement for Bradford City, bearing in mind what he's doing at Leighton Orient at the moment.
Yeah, not a name that I've seen on the bookies list, to be fair. So you might have to put a few quid on that one yourself to get that emotion.
I might have to, yeah.
He's the one, isn't he, who ticks the most boxes? But obviously, he was linked with the job where before Hughes got it, there were rumours circulating in social media that he was in the crowd for the game before Hughes was appointed the next day. That even we had a plan to bring him in and bring Paul Julian as director of football. There were rumours circulating that was going to happen. I just think he's the one. If you could pick anybody at the moment, who's managing a first team, a first team somewhere rather than an under 21 coach, he's the one that you'd go for. But like you say, it's the financial side of that, isn't it? And whether we could afford to do that and whether he'd be willing to leave. I think possibly he would be. I think he'd look at the size of us and think maybe how far can he get Leighton Orient? How far can he get Bradford City? I get the impression that he's very ambitious and he believes in his own ability. So maybe he would consider us, but we'd have to be, like I say, mate, having those discussions now, like you said, while Kevin McDonald's buying us some time.
Well, time will tell. I mean, we'll kind of wrap it up here. We've been on for a good 45 minutes or so. Obviously, Wimbledon on Saturday. we will focus on the football just to kind of round up. Your thoughts on this one? And obviously, for Kevin McDonald, will he make it 3 out of 3?
It's a tricky one, isn't it, Wimbledon? Because they're having a good season so far. They've last year was really poor for them, wasn't it? Really, they were just nowhere at it at all. But they've started really well this year. So it's a tough game, and there is that element of with City at the moment, like the manager search, as we talked about. It can take time a little bit, but all it takes is one bad 90 minutes. And it all comes crashing down to we must get an appointment made, etc. And you go in the week after that, you've got Wrexham at home coming up very quickly down the tracks.
Yeah,
so,
no less.
Exactly, yeah. So you do need, you kind of hope, I mean, a draw would be okay on Saturday. Obviously, a win would be amazing, but I think you're looking at that just thinking, if you need to kind of keep that momentum we've got going, and getting a point would be acceptable given their start to the season, and just keep that mood ticking along. Otherwise, you probably the pressure cooker suddenly is there again.
Jazz?
Yeah, it's so fragile, isn't it? We talked about like someone getting us promoted and then fans wanted them out 6 months later. It's the same with a game. Win a game, give Kevin McDonald the job. Lose a game, we need to get someone in straight away, like Jason just said. It'd be interesting to see how the fan reaction would be if we lost on Saturday. I do believe that's probably what would happen. Right, that's enough for Kevin McDonald. Let's go and get somebody. But yeah, I don't know. I think a draw would be a good result, like Jason says. But it'd be interesting to see how he matches up against teams that don't want to play football, like Swindon did as well. I get the impression Wimbledon can be quite direct, even at home. So that might be a test for him too, and see how he comes out the other side of that.
Is the clamour for Kevin McDonald, if he wins, if they win on Saturday, is it that strong? I can't help but feel in the back of my mind that even the most ardent City fan that would really want Kevin McDonald after 3 wins, it just is far too much of a gamble, surely. Far too much.
Yeah, to me it totally is. But you can see a little bit already, even after in the wake of the Grimsby game yesterday, of people saying really wanting to have a chance and stuff like that. And I just feel like we've been here before with Mark Truman a couple of years ago, where he came and started really well, and it was a bit of, again, it was a massive dip under Stuart McCall towards the end, and it kind of levelled off with what he did in the recovery. And then it was given the job to end the season. Fair enough, that was a good idea at that moment in time. Then a couple of weeks later, we're giving him a two-year contract, and you think, and at the time, you're thinking he's not had that downturn yet where things go a bit wrong. We don't know what he's made of, and by the end of the season, we lost 7 in a row, and we had to stand him down as manager. And I think there's just that rush to do something sometimes. And I think the time with Truman, there's a talk of we've got to get him tied down now because another club will get him otherwise. And there's almost, you can hear it a little bit now with Kevin McDonald, people saying, well, he's clearly going to be a brilliant manager one day. We've got to get him now. And I don't think that's true at all. It's just, and I think for him as well, you're a long time retired. He has had a really difficult few years, not played much football. He's come to Valley Parade now with real opportunity to have a good end to his playing career. He's not in a rush. I just think, win or lose or draw Saturday, I think you've got to be really careful about just taking such a short-term decision of appointing Kevin McDonald, because up until before Swindon, no one would be saying he should be the next manager of Bradford City.
No, we were all shocked, weren't we, when he got the job last Wednesday? And I think, the thing is that, like you said, City fans are so bipolar that that's what could happen. Everyone's like, get him in straight away. But is that not where Ryan needs a bit of advice and just say, look, just calm down. Let's just see how he reacts to a bit of adversity, like we should have done with Truman. Maybe speaking to someone or having someone in the club who can give that kind of advice, rather than sort of saying it in hindsight, might be beneficial going forward.
Yeah, time will tell. We have been kind of tried to get in touch with Ryan Sparks to see if at some point we can get him on the podcast, on the show at some point. But I'm sure at the moment he's possibly a little bit too much of a busy man to free up some time for us. But hopefully before long we'll get him on. He was supposed to come on course, on deadline day, but had to cancel the kind of 11th hour. To be fair, as that turned out, you did actually make some transfer signings off the back of that. So, we'll see.
Yeah.
Jason, Gaz, a big thank you for joining us. For everyone that's watched and commented, a big thank you as well. If you're watching on Catch Up, do stick some comments on there. We always like to get your thoughts and views on the Bantam season and where things go from here. But for myself and from Jason and Gaz, a big thank you for joining us tonight. And we'll be back very soon here on the West Yorkshire Football Show.